You're listening to the Colts Blue Zone Podcast with Mike Chappell and Dave Griffiths.
Inside the Fox 59 CBS 4 podcast studio, welcome to the Colts Blue Zone Podcast. Alongside Mike Chappell and Matt Adams, I'm Dave Griffiths. Glad to have you along on this podcast at the end of January. As we know, the Super Bowl matchup in the NFL this year will be a repeat of just a couple years ago, the Kansas City Chiefs, who finally did score 30 points in a game in the AFC Championship win over the Bills, and the Philadelphia Eagles after dispatching their NFC East rival, Washington
Yet
Commanders.
another one-possession, one-score game.
What's that? Another one for the Chiefs.
That's
yes,
like
it was.
17 or 18 in a row.
It's ridiculous.
It's unbelievable.
And they keep winning them. And
they find ways.
They do. And it's quite remarkable. You have a quarterback who finds ways to win. You have enough playmakers on the outside. You have a defense that really gets after the quarterback and confuses them, especially at the proper times in the game, as we saw in that AFC Championship game.
Kincaid still should have made the catch.
Yes, he should have. Like, completely. Like, we could get into that game because there were so many things at the end of that game with the questionable calls, with the questionable play calls.
4th and 1.
Exactly. Or just not being prepared for a blitz, it seems like, on 4th down from the defensive coordinator who loves to blitz you on 3rd and 4th down especially. So
it's curious. It's curious.
And all that to say, you're right, Chap. Like, the catch should have been made.
They showed a high up of the play develop, and Kincaid was open from the jump.
Yep.
And if he had a half a second longer, it would have been an easy throw for like 30.
Mm-hmm.
But he's still a great throw under pressure.
It was a
really
great throw.
He should have caught the ball. Like Mark Andrews. We're talking about tight ends and all this.
Yes, we are.
Man, sometimes they break your heart.
They do. It could be a top need for the Colts. We are going to get into what is the Colts' top need this offseason.
I've got an idea. So go ahead.
Okay. Well, we'll get into that a little bit later in the podcast.
Will you include me in the conversation?
Yeah, we'll include you in the conversation. Okay. Yeah, it'll be all you. That could be a specific need. It could be more of an ethereal need, and we can just kind of dive into the ins and outs of all the descriptions of just a simple sentence about what they could need better. But anyway, let's get to a little bit more about what's going on in Indianapolis, of course, since this is the Colts Blue Zone podcast, which you can follow on Twitter at Colts Blue Zone, and us individually. Matt Adams is at Statomatty, Mike Chappell at mchappell51. I'm at DaveG_sports, and you can read all Mike's work online at fox59.com, CBS4Indy.com, as various happenings happen with the Colts throughout the offseason. And the story of the week here in Indy has been the introduction of defensive coordinator Lou Anarumo, coming to speak with the media over from his previous position where he was let go as defensive coordinator of the Cincinnati Bengals. We talked about him a little bit last week, but now we got to talk with him. So talking about his 3-word philosophy, Anarumo says he's going to be, or his defense should be smart, fast, and physical. All 3 good things, obviously. If smart's the first one, that's fantastic. You want a smart defense out there that you're not whacking your head after a 7th missed tackle of the game.
How many times have we seen that?
Exactly. Or what have you. He stressed communication and flexibility on defense and keep the quarterbacks guessing. And to me, confusing the quarterback is the most important thing a defensive coordinator can do. Either confusing or scaring, if that's the word you want to use, or hobbling. That kind of brings up injury.
You slow their process. You slow the process down for them.
Exactly. Yes.
Or however you want to say it, speed it up to where it's not 7-on-7 that we saw too many times.
It can't be just we do what we do,
right?
And good luck trying to beat us. Like, we're going to get into this coverage and try to find the gaps. Because quarterbacks are too good. They are just too good. You need to find ways to confuse them at the line of scrimmage and to make sure that they don't know what you're going to do. It's not going to work on every down because quarterbacks are still good. But if you can make them question what they're doing on 1 out of every 3 plays, even, like, I think that's a really good defensive coordinator that can make a quarterback take an extra beat before he's throwing because he doesn't know what's going on, or, like you said, speed him up to try to get the ball out quickly because the blitz is coming in his face and he's not quite ready to do it. That's what a successful defense, to me, should be in the NFL, especially in the AFC, where it seems like you're going against another great quarterback or a rising young quarterback every week, Chap.
Well, it's CJ Stroud twice. You're going to see Stroud twice. Mm-hmm. And at some point, Trevor Lawrence is going to get back on track probably.
Liam Cohen, by the way, head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars now, coming over from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers he wasn't going to.
Did you see the one clip of him?
No, I didn't. I haven't seen much anything.
Where he said Duval?
I saw the Duval clip,
Duval.
That was creepy. That was just creepy. And I know he's
trying to play to the fan base.
And if you do that often enough, then you're among the fan base. But no, I went back and looked at it because it was on these coaching hires. I like to have seen more of the Jerry Jones, the hire. And because Stephen Jones was talking about, because people have been ripping Dallas with their decision. And he said, well, and you'll enjoy this part where he said, we're the 6th winningest team in the last 15 years. So we're figuring that's like upper quartile.
Yeah, upper quartile.
Upper quartiles.
But they're really 9th, so he's fudging on the stats.
Right.
And the fun fact of all time is the Colts have won a playoff game since Dallas has.
The fun fact of all time is every other NFC team has hosted a playoff game since the last time the Dallas Cowboys did.
It's unbelievable.
Every team has made the NFC Championship game, I think even. Is that it? It might be just host a playoff game, but it's just a tremendous.
It's amazing to where, and it shows you Jerry Jones's ability to be a promoter and a marketer is they're still considered America's team.
Yeah,
and they'll still get 4 or 5 primetime games and all of this. And, it's not exactly a strive for excellence. It's a strive for just be relevant.
Mm-hmm. Say basic competency.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I promise we're not going to go too deep on the Dallas Cowboys here.
No, I'm done.
The last thing I'll say is I saw a whole list of cap hits for the next season, and Dak Prescott's cap hit is like $86 million or something. It's the most in the league out of anybody.
Is that did he sign? I can't. Was that a multi-year deal he signed?
I can't tell.
To make it, it had to be a 2 or 3 year deal to make it that high, and it's hard. It's hard to lessen that. I mean, you put voidable years, and I saw one thing is on our outline is how the Colts can create cap space.
Cap space.
They can, but they don't have to.
They don't have.
They
to.
will because you do. And since we're bouncing around like we always do, the Saints, that's the only job still open.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, Kellen Moore's going to maybe get that job.
Right. Yeah.
Of all the teams, and I know Cleveland's still in the league. I was going to say New Orleans might be the least attractive. They're like $54 million over the cap.
Yeah.
And
big
they've got an old quarterback, which there were times I liked Derek Carr. Now, not so much. Although maybe he'd be a good option here next year as a backup, which we'll get to.
Mm-hmm.
But it's one of 32 jobs. But sometimes getting into a bad team that shows no really way out for a couple of years, like Cleveland. You talk about quarterback hits. I mean, I think Deshaun Watson still counts. God, 50-60 million for the next 2 years.
Yeah,
each.
It's absurd. Yeah,
and to get out of it, you've got to have like a $190 cap hit in 1 year. So, but so there are worse, as we've talked. There are worse situations than where Indy is right now, but that should not be consolation for people.
Back to defensive coordinator Lou Anarumo. He was talked about 3 different Colts defenders during his session with the media. Those were DeForest Buckner, Kenny Moore, and Laiatu
Very
Latu.
interesting that he did that.
It is that he brought up.
Those guys are on the top of on the end of your tongue for a reason.
Mm-hmm. And Kenny Moore, I think, will be intriguing because he was an intriguing player, of course, switching from the Eberflus system to the Gus Bradley system. Now going from Gus Bradley to Lou Anarumo, obviously there'll be some changes. Kenny's a unique player. I think that he's going to be a good player in any system once he finds his way into it. And one of the things that Anarumo talked about specifically was how he likes to bring pressure off the edge,
Mike
off
Hilton
the corner.
in Cincinnati.
Exactly. He did that. And Kenny has been successful when he does that.
He really took off during Flus's
Yes,
tenure.
absolutely.
I mean, he really became a star with Flus.
Mm-hmm, definitely. And so I'm looking forward to seeing that more often, seeing a more active Kenny. If a little Kenny is good, more is better.
Right.
Yeah, and it's not a question of sending him every single play, but it's picking and choosing.
Well, that's what we're saying.
Getting the right look.
Have him guessing. Have him guessing. Is he coming this time or not? And that just it slows down his process of figuring things out.
Mm-hmm. Or just takes up 6-7 seconds of the clock pre-snap to like check him out and to call an audible and to see if everyone else is on the same page. And then one of your wide receivers doesn't hear on the other side.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's just not being obvious. It's just not being basic. It's not being vanilla and changing things up and not being known for just one specific thing. So yeah, those are the three guys. Besides Kenny Moore, DeForest Buckner is an obvious one. Been at the center of this defense for a long time. Been a guy who has led the team in sacks multiple times since he was traded for. Yep,
since 2020.
Yep, since he was traded for in 2020. And then Laiatu Latu, the other one, the last one, the rookie who had I think he had a fine.
I think he had a good year.
Good, maybe. Like
we're parceling on good and fine.
Yeah,
right.
It's certainly not more than that.
Right.
But like you can't guarantee. Like rookies come into the league and they have different time frames to growing into their potential. You love for a guy, especially the first defensive player taken in the draft, you would love for him to be dynamic and incredible
and approach Dwight Freeney's rookie year.
Exactly. But Dwight Freeney is a Pro Football Hall of Famer. And not everyone you draft is going to be that, you know? So like you take it with a grain of salt. You give him an opportunity to improve from year 1 to year 2 in the league.
What was it? 4 sacks
and 3 forced fumbles. Like 3 forced fumbles is pretty good.
In Jared Verse, the Pro Football Writers Defensive Rookie of the Year, he had 4.5 sacks.
Right.
Yeah.
Their numbers were really, really close,
especially on pressures. Although Verse had more pressures than Latu, but it wasn't as
Latu may have had just about as much like percentage pressures or whatever. So whenever you get into the weeds on that, you know, when you add 3 more sacks, and Latu was right there. He was like Freeney. He was right there on 2 or 3. Add those to your stats, and you look a lot better. So, yeah, it wasn't a bad year. I mean, we were talking good fight. It wasn't a bad year, and this is one where we always talk about, boy, the biggest jump is between year 1 and year 2. That's what you want to see with him, and because you know, I sort of joked when we mentioned last week, you know, Lou's not bringing Trey Hendrickson with him,
right?
You know, 35 sacks the last 2 years, so it helps to have a guy. I never like running back by committee. I never like pressure by committee. I like to have a guy. You know, when Justin Houston was really good, they never got that out of Ngakoue, I don't think. But when you've got the guy Freeney, Mathis, or Freeney and Mathis, it makes calling defensive plays so much easier when you've got a guy. Kansas City with Chris Ford. Holy smokes.
Chris Jones, right?
Chris Jones. The things that they can do to just win one-on-ones, which we see Buck do a lot of times.
Right.
So I know there's a segment of the media that's not all that enthused with Lou, but you were going to get a guy that had been fired because that's why he's available.
Right.
So yeah, I'm curious. It was as we talked, it was time. Gus's stint had run its course. They had to change something. And I'm just curious how this does and how his arrival changes or magnifies the need to add whomever, which we'll get into as far as positions in the offseason.
It'll be a different dynamic and one the defense definitely needs after another year that was honestly subpar in yards allowed, points allowed, whatever have you. And so yeah, we will see what happens. And our first impressions of Lou Anarumo. Again, you can read more online, Fox59, CBS4Indy.com, Fox59.com, CBS4Indy.com. 2 different websites.
I don't know how you keep that straight.
Thank you, Dave.
I know. I try.
I just send the stuff in and they post it.
Exactly.
I hope somebody reads it.
Yeah, I think 1 or 2 people do. So
I mean before it's posted.
Oh yeah, that too.
Because we need copy editors. God love them. Need copy editors.
We're world-class copy editors.
That's right.
For our digital team,
edited properly. Chuck Pagano, former Colts head coach, is back into coaching himself, and he is in the NFL. He'll be the senior secondary coach for the Baltimore Ravens and John Harbaugh there. Ravens obviously been a defensive-minded team for a long, long time, and Chuck's history before he was a defensive coordinator was working with secondary. Did it at University of Miami, did it elsewhere, and before he rose the ranks and eventually became head coach here in Indy.
I think he was defensive backs coach for the Ravens before he was their DC.
Yes,
for
I
a couple
believe he
years.
was. Yes, so he also goes back to Baltimore where he was before he was in Indy as well.
If you're the secondary coach with the Ravens, does John Harbaugh go to him and say, "We're going to bring in a senior guy"? I mean, it's sort of strange that you do that, but it just shows you the value that John Harbaugh puts in Chuck Pagano, who is at his core a coach. He's a lifer. He just is. And what was he out? Was it 3 or 4 years? We've got it on here.
He retired in 2020.
Right. So he just and he never stayed away from it. He was always had his hands in, whether it was local TV, whether it was Pat McAfee. So Chuck was always better in that form than he was like when he was here as a head coach, because he just rambled as a head coach. He had these sayings and these things in his head and they just kept coming up. And you said, "Okay, Chuck." I think Chuck might be a great example of a guy who is a really good assistant coach, which doesn't make you a really good head coach. And there's nothing wrong with it.
No,
Right.
Some guys are fit for the role and
Right.
some aren't. And I mean, Chuck gave it his all when he was here, but he definitely experienced more success when he was a coordinator.
He 53 and 43 here as a head coach.
Right.
I mean, he had Andrew Luck.
Yeah, people get fired for a lot worse than 53
Yes,
and 40.
yes, they do. So yeah,
Just a little worse.
I text Chuck and I said, it's kind of like the Godfather, where it keeps bringing you back in, it draws you back in. But Chuck's a lifer. He's an NFL guy, so good for him.
Yeah, he's got to work with guys like Kyle Hamilton there in Baltimore. Should be that's an easy sell. Hey, Chuck, come back and work with Kyle Hamilton.
Yep.
And he's like, hey, yeah, okay, we can do that. And so
what was it with Malik Hooker? Remember, Chuck compared him to Ed Reed.
Chuck, no, not one of his best moments.
And then Ballard quickly comes in and says, "Yeah, let's not quite do that.
Let's not coronate him."
But now he's closer to Ed Reed back in Baltimore, and Kyle Hamilton's probably closer, not close,
right?
But he's closer to Ed Reed than Malik Hooker. And I tell you, Malik Hooker left here, had a pretty good career.
He has.
He's still around, and he's still playing well. So, but no, Chuck going back to Baltimore, it just makes sense. And I wonder how hard of a sell Harbaugh had to do on Chuck. I'm thinking not very hard.
Yeah, probably not. I think he was ready to get back in, and the opportunity to go back to Baltimore,
right?
Exactly, and work with Kyle Hamilton, among others, of course. But that would be to me an easy sell, right. I would think. So best of luck to Chuck there. In Baltimore, of course, unless they're playing the Indianapolis Colts, and then not as good luck to him. But the Colts offseason outlook, let's take a look at that as we get into this next part of the podcast here. The Colts are 18th right now in the NFL in available salary cap space. That's according to both Over the Cap and Spot Rack. Those are the two main sites that we use when talking about salary cap. About $28 million to spend is what it comes down to before any moves are made, and we'll get into that in a little while too about some moves.
Also, there's supposed to be about $10 million in carryover cap.
Right, that as well.
So don't take these numbers in concrete, because they will fluctuate, and again they will fluctuate when the Colts, to do what they need to do, to what they should do, they need to make some cap space.
Yes, this is the start of where it is.
Right.
This is a number that we anticipate will grow with the moves that they make. So it will not be less than this. Of course, some of it also is reserved for, draft picks and stuff and all that. But nevertheless, we're starting there. And it's a number that is not quite as high as it has been in the past because, last offseason, they made some moves to sign some people.
Some guys got paid last offseason.
And guys that are now going to be unrestricted free agents, a lot of them didn't have mammoth cap numbers. The biggest one would be center Ryan Kelly. Right. So he's off the books. But other guys on this list, Mo Alley Cox, Joe Flacco, EJ Speed, Julian Blackmon, Ashton Doolin, et cetera, they're either guys coming off their rookie contracts or guys that they signed to short-term deals as veterans that weren't being paid $15 million.
Yeah, none of them are outrageous salaries.
Right. So the team can now create more cap space, as Chap kind of alluded to, by either renegotiating current deals and
renegotiating. They'll just extend them.
Yes.
It's rare that a player will take a pay cut.
No, yeah, you shouldn't.
No. A few guys have, which is stupid because you don't recoup it. But they'll add years, voidable years, and which means you can spread out
more of a
restructure
bonuses. Than it is a renegotiating contract.
It's massage in the books is all it is.
You can also transition some salary to signing bonus in some way. Right. And the Colts don't often do that. They don't
like to push money forward.
Right. And that just hasn't been the modus operandi in the past. You can argue that it should be in the future. Like you can certainly make that argument that if there's supposed to be change in the team from last year to this year or from the past to the future, if you want different results, then you should. But anyway, just saying that they have not done that in the past, so I would not anticipate it in the immediate future. So the more likely outcome would be to either cut players or to bump some money down the road to, like you said, voidable years in the contract, which is basically you have a 3-year deal. The player's only contract to play 3 years, but you can bump some of that money to a 4th year.
Avoidable, correct.
It's what's called
no one expects it to be. They did one of the great ones was the Saints did it with Taysom Hill.
Right.
At one point, he was like a $40 million quarterback because most of it was funny money that he was never going to see. But I think the Colts started a little bit last year. They used to always like to front load these to where if it didn't work, you can really kind of walk away from a guy. But they started to give him signing bonuses, which by nature pushes money forward.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I tell you, if I'm Chris Ballard, and I know he won't have this in his mind when he does it, but I'm not too worried about pushing money into the future because this 2025 is when they need to really make a difference in make inroads and win. So if I'm pushing money into 2027,
how does that help you? Right.
Well, if it doesn't work and I'm Chris Ballard, I might not be here.
Right.
For 2027.
It'll be somebody else's problem.
So now I'm not saying just being crazy and pushing money out to that extreme, but I think they have started to show a little bit of flexibility on not front loading as much as putting it out over the course of the contract.
There needs to be some kind of balancing act for Chris Ballard as he's doing this. He said after the season, knowing that he's on thin ice or thinner ice as he has been in the past. He said he's not just going to backload every contract and if it doesn't work out, just leave the next guy in a horrible situation. Right. He kind of alluded to that, but like you said, if you're actually going to try to win this year, which is important to do, like you need to make some moves and you need to sign some players. You need to bring in some competition. Like there need to be some things that are done. Right. And to bring in the guys that you want, game-changing guys, you're going to need to put some money into the future, whether you're here for it or not. And at that point, like it's still trying for this year.
Correct.
It's not just pushing everything, kicking the can down the road. So like I said, it just needs to be a balancing act. You cannot just say, well, we can't put anything in the future.
And he admitted he's been stubborn.
Right.
He did a couple of times. And there has to be flexibility. And again, with the current cap at $28 million and change, that's not enough to do what needs to be done. It's just not. Again, if you sign, and I've been lobbying for 3 or 4 guys who are going to make a difference. Well, those are going to be $8, $9, $10 million a year players,
right?
And that money goes quickly.
Yep.
And there's a couple. Again, it's a good timing from a roster building point that there's not a lot of guys on their free agent list. You think, man, well, you got to bring this guy back.
Mm-hmm.
I could argue you could walk away from all of them. They won't.
Right.
But as opposed to last year where they signed, 7 or 8 of those guys, and it was like $150 million in guaranteed contracts.
Right.
There's none of those guys this year. Dio, maybe. I don't know. We can argue that later on.
Let's do that list before we get into kind of what you can do with the cap. So the notable unrestricted free agents, Ryan Kelly kind of tops the list, who made it seem like he's gone after the season, which if he is, hat tip to Ryan Kelly for the years that you were here. And thank you for, like, Colts fans should be saying thank you for your service. Thank you for your service to the city of Indianapolis. And best of luck to you in the future. Good luck.
Right.
Mo Alley Cox, who Colts fans have wanted to cut for like 5 years in a row.
He just keeps hanging around,
but he hangs around
because they can't find somebody better.
Because he can block too,
right?
And that helps. Joe Flacco at quarterback. Don't anticipate he'll be back. If you want to actually bring in someone to compete with Anthony Richardson, as it seemed like Chris Ballard said he wanted to do, it's going to be a Justin Fields, a Jameis Winston, a Sam Darnold, whatever have you. And we'll get into that.
Marcus Mariota. Right.
We'll get into that another time. But if you want to actually challenge him, Joe Flacco's not the guy to do that. E.J. Speed, a starting linebacker, who was unfortunately as famous this year for being on a much maligned podcast or for missing tackles as he was for anything good that he did on the field, which, to be fair, he did some good things. Like, I'm not just throwing him.
But he was better the year before.
He was better the year before. Julian Blackmon was signed to a 1-year deal. He was a guy who was a free agent last offseason and was one of the last players to sign because he was out there looking for something better. Didn't get anything better. Came back on a 1-year prove-it deal. Didn't prove it. So
and got banged up again,
and he did.
Opening game, was it a shoulder, pectoral, whatever, a shoulder? And does a change at coordinator change how the team looks at Blackmon? I don't know, because Anarumo he leans on the safeties. He just does. And would Julian Blackmon maybe be stronger in their favor now, or do the injuries? I mean, this has been an injury. He played through it, but that'll be interesting to see. And they're not going to overpay it because, again, the league showed everyone, including Julian, what his value was last year, and it wasn't what Julian thought it would be.
Right. Wide receiver Ashton Dulin, one of the next players on this list, who has been a very important special teams player in the past. If you're ever at a Colts game and you're watching punt coverage, like, watch Ashton Dulin.
That's the guy.
He is good at what he does, and that's the best way I can do it as a gunner.
He won't command a monster contract.
Exactly. So if you're going to bring him back, it's going to be for $3 million a year, because he's a special teams player. He's a gunner that every once in a while makes a play on the field, which he did at the start of this year. He made a nice long.
You get something from offense on him on occasion too. So.
Yes, and I think that's a player it's not that expensive to bring back. He's maybe more valuable to you than he is to other teams. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him back. Taven Bryan on the defensive interior. I can't name one play that Taven Bryan has made over his 2 years. Nothing stands out. So, okay. Dayo Odengbo is a very interesting player.
This is interesting.
On this list. Maybe the most interesting that you can make an argument back and forth for Dayo. Because there have been times or sections, like 2 or 3 game stretches, where he has looked really, really good. And then other times...
Where'd he go? Yeah,
exactly. That he just hasn't shown up and hasn't made plays. But that can be said for a lot of defensive linemen, especially in rotation defensive linemen. So it comes down to, do you want to keep Dayo in part of your 8-man defensive line rotation, or do you want to draft a rookie and kind of start the process over again with someone else and spend your money elsewhere? You have to evaluate where you want to spend your money. Do you want to spend it on offense and giving Anthony Richardson the best possible playmakers to make plays? Or do you want to kind of shore up the defensive line? Is that where Lou Anarumo wants to, like, if he's given the opportunity, like, well, let's make sure that we have a good defensive line rotation before we worry about shoring up the linebackers and defensive backs. Like, that's those are questions that are going to have to be asked and answered at Colts headquarters between Chris Ballard in the front office and the coaching staff. So Odengbo is a player who will probably get a couple $1 million and maybe 2 or 3 years in free agency. It's not.
He's 25.
He's 25 years old, and he's had a couple seasons with a couple of sacks. I don't know them exactly.
Was it last year? He was part of that group last year,
right? With
the 51 sacks,
he
had a pretty good.
He did.
He was part of that.
He had a pretty good year last year, but again, this year didn't.
He had 8 sacks last year.
8 sacks, boom! Didn't really take a step forward this year. That's the problem.
He's had just 3 this year.
Yeah,
the last 3 years, 5, 8, and 3.
Yeah. So this year was a disappointment for him in a contract year to take a step back from 8 sacks.
But what does Lou think about it?
Exactly.
What does a new set of eyes think about a young player?
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard. When you think it's always when it's a coin flip, it's always better to re-sign your own.
It is,
because you know them, you know strengths, you know weaknesses, and there's less risk involved.
Mm-hmm.
So they've really got to decide how hard will it be to replace him. Like you said,
Mhm.
draft. I wouldn't take an edge player until, I don't know, 3rd round, 4th round, because I have other needs, stronger needs.
Mhm.
So that's
Especially a backup edge player at
right, a
that point.
rotational
Yes,
guy,
a rotational
a
edge player.
younger Tyquan Lewis.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to diminish Tyquan Lewis at all. So that'll be the most interesting to me. He and Julian Blackman.
Mhm. And that's the kind of guy, Dio, that if you're another team and you see, man, he had 8 sacks one year. Like
Right.
let's look at what he did that year,
Right.
and then let's look some tape of what he did this year. What was it the same? Was it different?
Why did it slip
Why
off?
did it go back? If you can talk yourself into, well, this is why it slipped off, and we want to use him more this way than he
Only
was in
takes one
23.
team.
One team gives him a 3-year, $30 million deal,
Right.
because they really think that he can be on a play-by-play basis.
I wouldn't be shocked if he got that kind of a contract.
Exactly.
offer.
Me neither.
Because the talent is there. We have seen it, and
Right.
he came out of college, I believe, with an Achilles injury,
Mhm.
and that really, as an explosive player, kind of hindered him his first couple years. But that has gotten
Right.
back all the way, pretty much.
So after Dio, we go to tight end Kylan Granson, who's a great dude, but has not produced on
You
the
want
field.
more.
Exactly.
You
You
just
want
want
more
more.
from the guy who's supposed to be the pass catching tight end, and just has not delivered significant results and stats on the field to really justify a second contract here when you're trying to boost the level of playmaking ability on the edge.
Would there be more of a chance of Mo coming back than Kylan Granson?
I think so 100% because Mo can block.
He would almost be like that 6th lineman
Yes.
in a game.
Yes.
Lineman, tackle.
Like, he can block better than Kylan can be a
Right.
playmaker.
Right.
So he has a better value one specific area. So that I would say Mo personally. And maybe you can make an argument the other way around. And I'm not saying that I'm 100% for sure
And
right.
I wouldn't argue all that strongly for Mo.
Exactly.
I would try to find something better, but they've been trying to find something better for the last 2 or 3 years. And here's Mo.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's Mo again, and he makes plays. He blocks. It gives you an occasional reception. That's more. The reception is more on them,
Mhm.
not using him more. But we're going to look at this tight end room next season in May or June. It's going to look totally different.
Quarterback Sam Ehlinger, also a notable unrestricted free agent. I mandate we're going to talk about Sam Ehlinger right here in the next couple minutes. Did you see what I did there, Chad?
He has value.
He does. He certainly does. He has value, but at the same time, he's going to be your third quarterback.
Right.
So do you want to pay money to a third quarterback? No. Like no, you don't want to. No. The answer is just no. Like you can talk yourself into like you like Sam. You think that
he has value in the quarterback room, in the locker room, and all that. But
shoot, man,
I know but
like you're trying to improve other areas of this team.
Right.
You're trying to get better in 2025.
Right.
Like, does signing Sam Ehlinger make you better in 2025?
If Sam can go somewhere and have a legitimate shot to be the backup, then go.
I think so too.
Go, yeah. and I think you probably will.
Yeah. Good luck to Sam if that's the case, and then you draft someone else to be that quarterback, or it's Jason Bean. That's right.
Right.
Jason Bean is your
he
third
did get a new contract.
Good for him. Yeah, exactly.
He got a futures contract.
Yeah, that is a new contract.
Well, yes, it is. It's also non-guaranteed.
Don't discount it.
It is also non-guaranteed. So,
but they want to keep him around at least.
Right. Yes. Thank God.
Right.
The last player on this notable unrestricted free agent list that Matt graciously put together for us is Will Fries at guard, who was having a very good year before he got hurt very badly in Jacksonville.
Broken leg.
It was a broken leg, and it was a whole ordeal on the field where the cart comes out and gets casted, and so immediately well shoot, so much for that season, and that's the kind of injury that makes a player in a contract year get a 1-year prove-it deal after that.
He was going to make money.
He was going to make good money.
Apparently what Glowinski got here wasn't 3 years, $18 million, was it?
I don't remember for sure, but that sounds maybe about right.
That's the kind of money he was going to make money
as a guard, yes,
and
not tackle money, but guard money.
Right,
it's still money,
and it would have been a decent signing bonus and guaranteed. So it's about timing, and I'm telling you, the offensive line fell off after he went out because he was playing that well.
Mm-hmm. And what a kind of rise in his career it was from I think he was a 7th round pick, not a 6th round pick. I think he was 7th though, out of Penn State, as a guy who's kind of a swing tackle guard prospect there. And early on when he played, I think he played in that, if I'm not mistaken, the infamous Sam Ellinger game in New England, yeah, and was one of the starting guards in that game, and where everything went wrong, not just him, but everybody on the offensive line.
Willie McGinnis got a sack in that game.
Yeah, I think so
that's
too.
How bad it was.
Yeah, nice. I'm trying to think of old Patriots players, and I can't think of any off the top of my head. But McGinnis is a good one to
Teddy Bruschi,
Richard Seymour. I mean,
I was trying to go way
and
back, but yeah, exactly. All good or bad additions to in this example.
Well, as we talked about too, they took moves as you have to do as a personnel department. They took measures for no Ryan Kelly, for I guess Braden Smith. I mean, he we don't know what's up with him,
right?
And we probably won't until I don't know when.
Maybe ever.
Maybe because I'm not ruling out the fact that we've seen him play his last game. I just because you don't know any better,
right?
But they took measures in the draft with Bortolini and Gonzalez. That's what you have to do. You always have to be drafting it with one eye on the future. I like to see Ryan Kelly back again, but I just think that's really not going to happen. And so we'll just see how this thing plays out.
I was just going to say I put 11 guys on this list, but there are a few others. Danny Pinner, Mark Glowinski, Ronnie Harrison, Trey Sermon, also free agents.
Grant Stewart
Stewart.
Is he unrestricted? He may be
unrestricted. Yeah.
Okay.
Almost all these guys are unrestricted free agents.
Because one of the running backs was exclusive, and they signed him to the old reserve contract, which I get them mixed up because I don't
Goodson,
care. Whichever.
Or I don't know.
See, they're the same.
Goodson did get re-signed.
Then
So, yeah.
Then the other one is unrestricted.
Sermon's an interesting one. I think you try to get somebody better.
He
for that
played
number
like
two.
almost a quarter of the snaps for the Colts last year, which is astonishing.
A lot, yeah. But like maybe
you need better.
I think you need someone who's a better pass catcher because Jonathan Taylor has proven that he's not that.
That's
right
not
now.
his game.
Like he's proven that he's not.
And if you keep going back to him, then that's on you.
It is exactly
at some point.
You need someone better.
He's
in that
telling
role.
you.
Yep. Like don't do it.
This is me.
Exactly.
I won't drop the ball at the goal line anymore, but I'm also going to drop a few passes.
You know what year Jonathan Taylor had the most catches in his career? Was from 2021. He just had that great ball from the guy who's now the backup quarterback heading to the Super Bowl.
Great catchable ball, right?
For the Kansas City Chiefs. Exactly. He threw a tremendous catchable ball. He's could be winning his second Super Bowl ring this year. I mean,
that's Hall of Fame level.
What else? It is. It's
Eli Manning too.
Exactly. So he's up for the Hall of Fame this year in his first year. So I mean,
Eli Manning, not Carson Wentz.
What?
Eli
Manning is up for the. Of course,
I don't want people to.
Of course, don't mix that up. But yes, the Philadelphia Eagles revenge game for Carson Wentz in the Super Bowl. Like I could see it now. The announcers just going crazy if Patrick Mahomes has to come out of this game
early.
Yes, or
oh my goodness,
or late. Or in crunch time. Either one. But
they're down 6 and they get the ball back with 3 minutes to play.
Oh my goodness!
Mahomes is over there getting his knee looked at.
Exactly.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Oh my. Yeah. Anyway, for those of us who are dreamers, perhaps we will see.
Super Bowl of us who have nightmares.
Exactly.
Depends on your
nightmare's a type of dream. We're a dreamer.
That's what I'm saying. It's kind of like good and fine. Good year, fine year.
Right. Okay. So a hat tip here to the Indy Stars, Nate Newell and Scott Horner, who kind of put together this list, which you can also find on Spot Rack if you go and
they do a good job with that.
They do.
It's there on Over the Cap. It's on Spot
Figure
Rack
out like how much cap space the Colts can get, and if you cut some of these players, there's some players like
these are not renegade cuts. These are I can see that.
These are fine cuts. Like if you go and you want to cut DeForest Buckner, you're not going to do that because it gives
Zaire Franklin.
Right.
It costs you.
It does. It costs you this year, and it adds with Buckner in particular. I saw it was like $37 million dead cap or something like that.
It's a huge hit.
So no, like those are not players that are feasible here.
Even trading him like Buck
would still be.
It's virtually the same thing, trading and cutting a guy because everything accelerates.
Right. Anyway, there are players that you can cut and save some money in the cap. The biggest number and the biggest name on the list is the starting right tackle Braden Smith, who did not play much of the second half of the season for a personal reason, which is all the Colts would get into. Shane Steichen was asked a couple times, wouldn't get into it.
Oh, I asked Ballard that
at the
at his
postseason press conference,
yeah.
which needed to happen. Like, just
I thought he would say something. I thought he
and
would expand.
he didn't.
He said this person, which is totally understandable.
It's fine to do, but again, I'm with you. Like, I expected a little bit more of reason, but that tells me that this is a serious issue.
That
like, whatever
it hasn't changed
and has not resolved.
Correct.
Exactly.
Correct.
So Godspeed to Braden, whatever he is dealing with. He's an important player that would make $19 million this year, but if you cut him, you save $16 million against the cap. You have to pay him like $3 million or whatever, because this is the last year of his contract, big contract that he signed.
2026, right?
2026?
2025.
Yes, this is the last year of his deal. So this is the time to cut players like this, veteran guys who you sign to contracts, and you can say, they're not living up to this deal, they're gone. But in his case, like, it's a different scenario, obviously.
Yeah, if he's not here next year, it's not because they don't think he can play. I don't think they would make that move. It's going to be this personal issue has not been resolved, like you said.
Right.
There's some players I can say, yeah, they need to get rid of him because of the cost. And okay, the next one, Samson Ebukam.
Mm-hmm.
He's a perfect example of why you might cut a player.
Cut him and save $8 million. It completely depends on where you think he is, I think, physically, in the health standpoint, from returning from his injury.
It's that Achilles, man.
Exactly.
That's a huge
it's like
thing
the
to
year
gamble
after.
on.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always the year after that those guys take a leap.
Mm-hmm. So
and we're talking the quick twitch, and that's what he is.
Mm-hmm.
That's his game.
He is that burst. Eric Fisher told us that. How he came back and he could play, but he didn't have that quick twitch. Well, how long would it take Samson to do that? Because he was a leading sack guy.
Yep, had 9 sacks, I think, one more than Dio last year.
You treat pass rushers different.
Yep,
you just do, because they're so doggone hard to find.
And every once in a while, a guy does come back from the Achilles the next year, and it works out. It's just, in my experience, just kind of following guys from the Colts and others, it feels like that first year, just you cannot bank on that.
And could they? I think they could. They could extend him, but then that sort of makes like next year is like, well, we don't expect much from him, and I don't think they're in the situation.
I'm not sure they can afford to do that. Not from a financial prospect, but from a production standpoint.
Right.
Yeah. So after Ebukam, you can save $8 million there. Raekwon Davis is the next one. It's about $6.5 million you can get from him. And again, like Taven Bryan, like I said earlier, I can't think of one play that Raekwon Davis made in his time with the Colts, which is just 1 year, unlike Bryan, who had 2 years. But like, if you can't think of one productive play that you made and you can save $6.5 million, like, why not do it?
Right.
You need backup defensive tackles for sure, 100%.
And here they'll be getting rid of 2 of them,
right,
with Bryan and Davis. But
maybe you sign one guy and pay them $7 million in free agency, and then you draft someone else and try to have him as the backup behind who's obviously you're starting to in Grover and Buckner next year. So like that would be like we say here, you save $6.5 million. So like you save that money, and then you get rid of Bryan too. So essentially, when you have to replace them, you save about $3 or $4 million. So it's not like you see these numbers, you're like, oh, they're saving so much, but it's a little bit. You have to replace them.
Right. You got to replace your losses.
So that allows you to send that $3 million to the offense, and sign someone over there.
It's easy to cut guys. It's easy to cut, but then you got to replace, and you got to replace. You'd have to replace Raekwon Davis with somebody who would be better at what they thought Davis was going to be.
Right.
So that's, again, I just caution fans that it's easy to cut 20 players. It just is.
Mm-hmm.
But then you've got to, replace them with people who hopefully are better, which in some cases it won't be that difficult to do.
Tyquan Lewis, if you cut him, you save $4.8 million.
Down year last year?
Maybe a little bit, but if you cut him, it's not saving all that much. We're at the point now where you're saving a little bit.
He missed a ton of time too. I can't remember what it was. He had an injury this year.
He did, yes.
So
he also had to wear the Oregon Duck.
That should be, and we've not seen Buck have to wear.
No, he has
Brutus.
not. No, Exactly. I maybe he has to do it this offseason. That'd be great if they did. If they did.
Timing is everything, and that was not the right time for after the Giants game.
He who laughs last.
Right. Sometimes they don't laugh at you.
Right.
So, but Tyquan's an interesting guy because he's a great guy in the locker room. Injuries have just kept him down, but he serves such a strong. Like I say, we've talked. We're kind of focusing on like 4 defensive linemen with these guys, with Ebukam and Davis and Lewis and all these guys, and Brian. So you got to be careful about how thin you want to make your defensive line.
Tyquan played in 10 games this year, so he missed 7.
Matt Gay, if you cut him, could save $2.75 million or $2.75 million.
And then you need a kicker.
Exactly, that's the problem.
Exactly.
You're going to pay $3 million for a kicker,
right?
If you want someone has any cash,
and he was perfect until he got outside of 50.
Right. Exactly.
So
try to get him healthy this offseason.
Wasn't he was he 3 for 10, 3 for 9 on 50 plus? I think it was. Yeah. And he was perfect inside 49. So I don't. That's one I wouldn't touch because people were so bent out of shape when they made him the second highest paid kicker in the league. Mm-hmm. We're talking about a kicker. Yeah. I don't mean it to come out like that. In the scope of roster building, a kicker and a punter and a holder are not even in the discussion of, are we paying too much for this guy?
Highest paid kicker, there's a big difference between that and your highest paid edge or your highest paid left tackle.
Receiver.
Or, any of those positions.
Mm-hmm. So if you cut all those guys, you can free up about $40 million almost in cap space, but you also incur $15 million in dead cap at the same time.
There was also another one, over the cap might have done it, projected not renegotiating, but retooling contracts. They can save buku bucks with going to Buck, to going to the guys that they extended last year, Grover, Zaire, people like that. Pitt, I don't know what you can do with him.
I don't think there's a lot of wiggle room with Pitt.
Right. But so, and again, I think that's something they normally don't do. They haven't had to do because they've had.
They've always had a bunch of cap space.
Well, they've had $70 million of cap space. Mm-hmm. But I think this is the case that, talking about cap space, we talked about the Saints. They're $54 million over the cap. They're a bad team with no coach and an old quarterback, and they're over the cap by $54 million.
So what can you do with that roster at that point?
I don't know. Gut it. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean that's basically your only choice because you've got to get out of that situation.
Right, and that's where if you're not careful with the Deshaun Watson thing, the Colts have never been in. They've carried heavy dead money with Matt Ryan, I think it was. Mm-hmm. Carson Wentz, maybe.
I think they had some. Yeah,
they had some. It wasn't awful.
They may have got some relief from that with the trade, but so you do not want to have where Dallas, like you said, the stupid number on that. It just paralyzes what you can do. These guys have okay cap room. I think they make a number of moves to give them good cap room because they've got to make some moves.
So, what is the Colts' biggest need this offseason? A question that can be answered pointedly or more roundabout, I think. I'll go first. And I think
Don't steal my answer.
In a word, it's change. Is like that's my answer. The Colts' biggest need is
change. You went a little more intangible.
I did. Like I was thinking more along the lines of something that can be
change it in approach to roster building.
Change.
Yes.
And
so you wanted more change than we got change a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I think that this team needs more change than has already kind of passed us by. In terms of actually being significantly better in the future. But anyway, we're past that now. So whatever. Then
get over it, would you?
Exactly. So get over it. So if it's not changes in personnel, it's changes in philosophy. Because what has been almost good enough. Like, do you want to be like that forever and try to just get over the hump? Continually being almost good enough.
The Pittsburgh Steelers.
That's a good example.
They're almost good enough, but
Steelers have been even one step better than the Colts, obviously.
Right, yeah, because they're in the playoffs almost every year. They almost always have a winning record.
Yes, every year.
But that can't be the standard.
Exactly.
And right now,
exactly
that's the standard in Pittsburgh.
right.
Let's not have a losing record.
Mm-hmm.
Again, the Colts have won a playoff game since Pittsburgh has.
Right. If you want to raise the standard, like I say this, like I'm not going to get into that, but if you want to raise the standard, then you need to change your philosophies. You need to change some people in the building who have set those philosophies, people who have been in leadership roles who have set those philosophies. And you need to make a marked decision that this is not going to be how it is here. And that sometimes requires you to take a step back. Like, I think that the Commanders are a really good example of this. And they obviously got a tremendous quarterback in the draft that really, really helped them along the way. But that was a team that had serious cultural problems over
a long time.
Like, not just the past 5 or 6 years. But Dan Campbell goes out, and they bring in different people at the top. They sign a new head coach. And in 1 year, they made a dramatic change. It doesn't always work out for the best like that immediately. Or Dan Campbell going to Detroit. Like, it doesn't always work out so well, but it sheds you of your past. And right now, the Colts' past, it's not as bad as the Commanders or the Lions were, either way, but it's not good enough. It is, like you said, Chap, I think like the Pittsburgh Steelers. And the Steelers have been a model franchise in the NFL, quote unquote, for a long time. They have decent recent success with Ben Roethlisberger winning a couple of Super Bowls. But then you think, well, how recent is that success? It's not that recent anymore.
It's been a while.
Like
now.
we're at the point. I'm at the point. Like, I'm almost 40 years old, and I think the Steelers won Super Bowl. That was just a couple years ago, right? No, it's not anymore. Like, I'm at that point in my life where I think, oh, the Steelers are a good program. They won a couple recent Super Bowls. No, that was actually a long time ago now that the Steelers won Super Bowls. Kids that are 15 years old don't remember the Steelers being that good to win those Super Bowls. So, like, I put it in the context of me growing up in the 90s, like a team that was good at that time, the Bengals were in a couple of Super Bowls in the 80s with Boomer Esiason, but I didn't remember that. Like, the Bengals were terrible in the later 90s as they got away from Esiason. So, like, that's kind of how I had to explain it to myself. But like, you need to change. You need some big changes inside the building and in the direction that you're headed and the philosophies that you have, offensively, defensively, personnel-wise, strategically. Core values, like things need to change. And can the same people make changes? Maybe. But we will see if that's possible with this group of people. And I'm interested to see, because it's always going to be intriguing. The NFL shares rather awesome storylines week by week, month by month. But if things and philosophies and big picture items remain the same, then what are you doing at the end of the day? Then it just shows me that your standards have kind of remained the same. And that's not what you want your standards to be. I think you want to push your standards higher, and being almost good enough has just not been good enough. And I think Joe Flacco's answer to my question at the last week of the season, it was an awesome question.
Mm-hmm.
You can't trick yourself into thinking you're almost there. You can't do it if you want to be successful in the NFL. You've got to be able to say, we're not good enough here, we're not good enough here, we're not good enough here. That enables you to take your next step and not just fool yourself into thinking, well, if a couple more things go our way, if we tweak things here and there, then
it'll be fine program. Next year.
Which they were tricked into doing after 2023.
Right. Yes, very much so. When they came just like a couple yards short of beating the Texans and making the playoffs. They were tricked into doing it. But I think they've been tricked into doing this year after year, like since Luck retired. Like,
pretty much since 2019, we're almost there. Almost there. We just need the quarterback.
With Phillip Rivers, didn't work out. Oh, we need a quarterback that can be more dynamic and more playmaking. We'll bring in Carson Wentz. That didn't work out. We need someone who's more of an adult in the room, and we bring in Matt Ryan. That didn't work out. Oh, we'll bring in a rookie this time, and then he got hurt. And
work in progress.
Almost led you there. Oh, we just get that rookie back again. Like it's been the same thing in a different manner year after year. We're almost there, little tweaks. We're almost there, little tweaks. Like, you're not almost there. You need to make changes if you want this franchise to be one that is where you want to be, a contending franchise in the long term, in the AFC and the NFC, what have you. That's my thought about what needs
But for our discussion, so
change.
what that change isn't going to
Anthony
happen.
Richardson needs playmakers right now to see if he's the guy.
Okay.
Like, you need to see if he's the guy and make a determination one way or the other. And although I like the guys that are on the offense right now, like there's no dynamic outside talent on this Colts
Higgins.
roster. T. Higgins is a good player, a really good player. I don't know how great he is because he's always been number 2.
You're going to pay him great. You're going to
It's
pay
either,
him
yeah, exactly. That's
30,
the thing.
35
So,
million.
like, I would rather, if it's out there, do the deal like the A.J. Brown deal, and which again is one of the dumbest deals of the last decade in not just the NFL but in any professional sports, is that the Titans decided to give up A.J. Brown. See if there's another team out there that's dumb enough to part with the number 1 receiver that you know is a number 1 receiver, and I don't know who that's going to be. But that you have to kick the tires everywhere and try to get the best possible playmakers in for Anthony Richardson. And if that's not possible, then T. Higgins might be your best option to do that. So we'll see. But you need a big number, a salary cap number, to bring in a guy like Higgins.
Right.
And that means you have to cut a lot of people to do it, and maybe a lot of those other guys that are valuable players. But you cut those guys to give Anthony Richardson the best opportunity to be successful and see if he's actually good enough to do this or not. And if he's not, Ballard's gone, probably the head coach is gone, and you gut it and start from scratch in a year or two and then try to build something actually more from the studs than you have right now. That's my thought. Chap, why don't you go? And then Matt,
we're in the same position. It's quarterback. I think they address playmaker in the draft. I think that 14th pick, I did a mock draft thing where I looked it all around, and Tyler Warren looks like he could be there, and boy, he's got, as we said, he's got the right number. He's got 44.
Daniel Jeremiah had him drafted like 8th or 9th in his draft, by the way. So yes, go ahead.
And we saw what Brock Bowers did last year with really, really substandard quarterback play. So I think the draft does that. To me, the most important offseason acquisition will be backup quarterback. It's got, and I don't like the market. I don't like what's out there, the possibilities. You've got to have somebody who legitimately pushes Richardson for the start. I'm not saying, again, Flacco, he was never brought in to be that guy. So I don't know who it's going to be, but because if Richardson doesn't take that step, if he's the same guy mechanically and 50%, then nothing else matters. And you've got to have a quarterback who can get you along, unless you take the approach. If it's not Richardson, then it doesn't matter, and we're going to go 3-14 next year. We meaning the Colts. So
right.
I think it needs to be. They've got to get that quarterback room right, because I think they will do the other things with the tight end. I just can't see Chris Ballard spending $30 million on a receiver. I just don't.
I know.
I would like to see that, because again, Michael Pittman, love him as a player.
Love him.
I just want more.
Mm-hmm.
I want more. I'm a number 1 guy, and
love what he brings. Love his toughness.
Everything about him.
Love his attitude.
That he played with a fracture in his back last year for what he told us all season. I thought he said it happened in
he did early. It's in the preseason,
right?
In the joint practice,
right? So you've got to get the backup quarterback right, and if they don't get play from the quarterback that's winning, nothing else matters.
Matt.
Well, I was banking on someone saying safety, since that's a big part of Anarumo's defense. But I was really looking at the tight end position, because this group, 39 catches, 467 yards, 2 touchdowns. If you go down, you look at tight ends for the league, 25 individual tight ends had more yardage than Indy's group combined. 23 had more touchdowns, and 32 had more receptions. They just are not getting enough out of that group. Mo Alley Cox is a good blocker, but they've got to get more from there. There's not a whole lot. I did some looking around. The free agent Zach Ertz is out there. Mike Gesicki from the
really
Bengals.
Good NFC Championship game, Zach Ertz, but he's going to get 1 year older again.
Gesicki would.
Gesicki's a good one. Austin Hooper's out there from New England. If you're looking for a free agent, Tyler Conklin from the Jets. Then Juwan Johnson from the Saints. But in the draft, you got a couple of guys. You've got Tyler Warren, and then there's also Loveland from Michigan. Colston Loveland, I think, from Michigan. And then there's another guy out of Bowling Green that has turned some heads because he had a monster season for them.
And
remember how Ballard talked about we weren't able to attack the middle of the field?
Yeah. And I keep thinking about Josh Downs being the safety valve for that offense. And he's a slot guy, and he's great at what he does. If you can have a good tight end over the middle, that can just really unlock everything for both the quarterback and the offense as a whole. So that's where I leaned at on where I think they need to get better immediately is at tight end.
You can have like a good slot guy and a good tight end and have them do different things. You know, you look at what the Patriots did with Julian Edelman and Rob Gronkowski, or Wes Welker and Rob Gronkowski. And you go further back than that, and you could even find more examples. But it's not like, oh, we have one guy already. Like we have Josh Downs already. So what role would a good tight end?
We don't need anybody for the middle now because we got Josh Downs. That's
not the right approach to take it all. And I think you're completely right. I think you absolutely need to be better at tight end. And
I went back and looked. It took me a while. The last time this franchise tight end room had fewer than 39 catches as a group was in 1994.
Good grief.
That tells you how bad it was.
Yeah.
And they were a non-factor. So it's got to get better. And that's on they've drafted decently early. I mean, not decent players, but semi early, and they've not gotten much out of it.
Because Jelani Woods still hasn't played, enough.
Can't go into next. It's kind of like Juju Brents. You can't go into next year expecting.
No.
Well, this is the year.
Yeah, this is the year for Jelani Woods. Well, the guy hasn't been on the field that much, so you can't bank on that.
Based on what we've done, they've had too much. Not blind faith because they've got evidence. So yeah, that's tight end is. If I'm just doing I said quarterback, but tight end, corner, and safety, those are the three non-quarterback positions that they've got to
shore those up.
So if Chris Ballard comes to the microphone to us about one of those positions and says, we like our guys this offseason, we're going to
punch a wall.
That's right. And that might be the proper reaction based on what we've seen in the past from similar reactions. So we do appreciate you watching and listening to this Colts Blue Zone podcast. Download, subscribe, get us delivered to your podcast listening device as soon as we drop every week, which will mostly be on Wednesdays here throughout the summer. From Mike Chappell and Matt Adams. I don't know why I did it that way.
I don't either. Don't do that anymore.
I'm Dave Griffin.
Dave Griffin.
And we'll see you next week on the Colts Blue Zone podcast.